Chapter 7 of Agriculture for Beginners. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Agriculture for Beginners by Charles William Burkett. Chapter 7. Orchard, Garden, and Field Insects. Section 31. Insects in General. The farmer who has fought bugs on crop after crop needs no argument to convince him that insects are serious enemies to agriculture. Yet even he may be surprised to learn that the damage done by them, as estimated by good authority, amounts to millions and millions of dollars yearly in the United States and Canada. Everyone thinks he knows what an insect is. If, however, we are willing in this matter to make our notion agree with that of the people who have studied insects most and know them best, we must include among the true insects only such air-breathing animals as have 6 legs, no more, and have the body divided into 3 parts: head, thorax, and abdomen. These parts are clearly shown in Figure 136, which represents the ant, a true insect. All insects do not show the divisions of the body so clearly as this figure shows them, but on careful examination you can usually make them out. The head bears 1 pair of feelers, and these in many insects serve also as organs of smell and sometimes of hearing. Less prominent feelers are to be found in the region of the mouth. These serve as organs of taste. The eyes of insects are especially noticeable. Close examination shows them to be made up of 1,000 or more simple eyes. Such an eye is called a compound eye. An enlarged view of one of these is shown in Figure 138. Attached to the thorax are the legs and also the wings, if the insect has wings. The rear portion is the abdomen, and this, like the other parts, is composed of parts known as segments. The insect breathes through openings in the abdomen and thorax, called spiracles. An examination of spiders, mites, and ticks shows 8 legs. Therefore these do not belong to the true insects, nor do the 1,000-legged worms and their relatives. The chief classes of insects are as follows: the flies, with 2 wings only; the bees, wasps, and ants, with 4 delicate wings; the beetles with 4 wings; 2 hard, horny ones covering the 2 more delicate ones. When the beetle is at rest, its 2 hard wings meet in a straight line down the back. This peculiarity distinguishes it from the true bug, which has 4 wings. The 2 outer wings are partly horny, and in folding lap over each other. Butterflies and moths are much alike in appearance, but differ in habit. The butterfly works by day and the moth by night. Note the knob at the end of the butterfly's feeler, Figure 143. The moth has no such knob. It is important to know how insects take their food, for by knowing this we are often able to destroy insect pests. Some are provided with mouth parts for chewing their food. Others have a long tube with which they pierce plants or animals, and, like the mosquito, suck their food from the inside. Insects of this latter class cannot, of course, be harmed by poison on the surface of the leaves on which they feed. Many insects change their form from youth to old age so much that you can scarcely recognize them as the same creatures. First comes the egg. The egg hatches into a worm-like animal known as a grub, maggot, or caterpillar, or, as scientists call it, a larva. This creature feeds and grows until it finally settles down and spins a home of silk, called a cocoon. Figure 145. If we open the cocoon, we shall find that the animal is now covered with a hard outside skeleton, that it cannot move freely, and that it cannot eat at all. The animal in this state is known as a pupa. Figures 145 and 146. Sometimes, however, the pupa is not covered by a cocoon. Sometimes it is soft, and sometimes it has some power of motion. Figure 141. After a rest in the pupa stage, the animal comes out a mature insect. Figures 142 and 143. From this you can see that it is especially important to know all you can about the life of injurious insects, since it is often easier to kill these pests at one stage of their life than at another. Often it is better to aim at destroying the seemingly harmless beetle or butterfly than to try to destroy the larvae that hatch from its eggs, although, as you must remember, it is generally the larvae that do the most harm. Larvae grow very rapidly, therefore the food supply must be great to meet the needs of the insect. Some insects, the grasshopper for example, do not completely change their form. Figure 147 represents some young grasshoppers, which very closely resemble their parents. Insects lay many eggs and reproduce with remarkable rapidity. Their number therefore makes them a foe to be much dreaded. The queen honeybee often lays as many as 4,000 eggs in 24 hours. A single housefly lays between 100 and 150 eggs in one day. The mosquito lays eggs in quantities of from 200 to 400. The white ant often lays 80,000 in one day, and so continues for 2 years, probably laying no less than 40,000,000 eggs. In one summer, the blue bottle fly could have 500 million descendants if they all lived. The plant louse, at the end of the 5th brood, has laid in a single year enough eggs to produce 300 million young. Of course, everyone knows that, owing to enemies and diseases, for the insects have enemies which prey on them just as they prey on plants. Comparatively few of the insects hatched from these eggs live till they are grown. The number of insects which are harmful to crops, gardens, flowers, and forests seems to be increasing each season. Therefore, farm boys and girls should learn to recognize these harmful insects and to know how they live and how they may be destroyed. Those who know the forms and habits of these enemies of plants and trees are far better prepared to fight them than are those who strike in the dark. Moreover, such knowledge is always a source of interest and pleasure. If you begin to study insects, you will soon find your love for the study growing. Exercise. Collect cocoons and pupae of insects and hatch them in a breeding cage, similar to the one illustrated in Figure 149. Make several cages of this kind. Collect larvae of several kinds. Supply them with food from plants upon which you found them. Find out the time it takes them to change into another stage. Write a description of this process. The plant louse could produce in its 12th brood 10 sextillion offspring. Each louse is about 1/10 of an inch long. If all should live and be arranged in a single file, how many miles long would such a procession be? Section 32. Orchard insects. The San Jose scale. The San Jose scale is one of the most dreaded enemies of fruit trees. It is, in fact, an outlaw in many states. It is an unlawful act to sell fruit trees affected by it. Figure 150 shows a view of a branch nearly covered with this pest. Although this scale is a very minute animal, yet so rapidly does it multiply that it is very dangerous to the tree. Never allow new trees to be brought into your orchard until you feel certain that they are free from the San Jose scale. If, however, it should in any way gain access to your orchard, you can prevent its spreading by thorough spraying with what is known as the lime sulfur mixture. This mixture has long been used on the Pacific coast as a remedy for various scale insects. When it was first tried in other parts of the United States, the results were not satisfactory, and its use was abandoned. However, later experiments with it have proved that the mixture is thoroughly effective in killing this scale, and it is perfectly harmless to the trees. Until the lime sulfur mixture proved to be successful, the San Jose scale was a most dreaded nursery and orchard foe. It was even thought necessary to destroy infected trees. The lime sulfur mixture and other sulfur washes not only kill the San Jose scale, but are also useful in reducing fungus injury. There are several ways of making the lime sulfur mixture. It is generally best to buy a prepared mixture from some trustworthy dealer. If you find the scale on your trees, write to your state experiment station for directions for combating it. The codling moth. The codling moth attacks the apple and often causes a loss of from 25 to 75% of the crop. In the state of New York, this insect is causing an annual loss of about $3 million. The effect it has on the fruit is most clearly shown in Figure 152. The moth lays its egg upon the young leaves just after the falling of the blossom. She flies on from apple to apple, depositing an egg each time, until from 50 to 75 eggs are deposited. The larva, or worm, soon hatches and eats its way into the apple. Many affected apples ripen too soon and drop as windfalls. Others remain on the tree and become the common wormy apples so familiar to growers. The larva that emerges from the windfalls moves generally to a tree, crawls up the trunk, and spins its cocoon under a ridge in the bark. From the cocoon the moth comes ready to start a new generation. The last generation of the larvae spends the winter in the cocoon. Treatment. Destroy orchard trash which may serve as a winter home. Scrape all loose bark from the tree. Spray the tree with arsenate of lead as soon as the flowers fall. A former method of fighting this pest was as follows. Bands of burlap 4 inches wide tied around the tree furnished a hiding place for the larvae that came from the windfalls or crawled from wormy apples on the tree. The larvae caught under the bands were killed every 5 or 6 days. We now know, however, that a thorough spraying just after the blossoms fall kills the worms and renders the bands unnecessary. Furthermore, spraying prevents wormy apples, while banding does not. Follow the first spraying by a second 2 weeks later. It is best to use lime sulfur mixture or the Bordeaux mixture with arsenate of lead for a spray. Thus one spraying serves against both fungi and insects. The plum curculio. The plum curculio, sometimes called the plum weevil, is a little creature about 1/5 of an inch long. In spite of its small size, the curculio does, if neglected, great damage to our fruit crop. It injures peaches, plums, and cherries by stinging the fruit as soon as it is formed. The word stinging, when applied to insects, and this case is no exception, means piercing the object with the egg layer, ovipositor, and depositing the egg. Some insects occasionally use the ovipositor merely for defense. The curculio has an especially interesting method of laying her egg. First she digs a hole, in which she places the egg and pushes it well down. Then with her snout she makes a crescent-shaped cut in the skin of the plum around the egg. This mark is shown in Figure 154. As this peculiar cut is followed by a flow of gum, you will always be able to recognize the work of the curculio. Having finished with one plum, this industrious worker makes her way to other plums, until her eggs are all laid. The maggot-like larva soon hatches, burrows through the fruit, and causes it to drop before ripening. The larva then enters the ground to a depth of several inches. There it becomes a pupa, and later, as a mature beetle, emerges and winters in cracks and crevices. Treatment. Burn orchard trash which may serve as winter quarters. Spraying with arsenate of lead, using 2 pounds of the mixture to 50 gallons of water, is the only successful treatment for the curculio. For plums and peaches, first spray when the fruit is free from the calyx caps or dried flower buds. Repeat the spraying 2 weeks later. For late peaches, spray a third time 2 weeks after the second spraying. This poisonous spray will kill the beetles while they are feeding or cutting holes in which to lay their eggs. Fowls in the orchard do good by capturing the larvae before they can burrow, while hogs will destroy the fallen fruit before the larvae can escape. The grape phylloxera. The grape phylloxera is a serious pest. You have no doubt seen its galls upon the grape leaf. These galls are caused by a small louse, the phylloxera. Each gall contains a female, which soon fills the gall with eggs. These hatch into more females, which emerge and form new galls, and so the phylloxera spreads. See Figure 155. Treatment. The Clinton grape is most liable to injury from this pest. Hence it is better to grow other more resistant kinds. Sometimes the lice attack the roots of the grape vines. In many sections where irrigation is practiced, the grape rows are flooded when the lice are thickest. The water drowns the lice and does no harm to the vines. The canker worm. The cankerworm is the larva of a moth. Because of its peculiar mode of crawling, by looping its body, it is often called the looping worm or the measuring worm. Figure 157, C. These worms are such greedy eaters that in a short time they can so cut the leaves of an orchard as to give it a scorched appearance. Such an attack practically destroys the crop and does lasting injury to the tree. The worms are green or brown and are striped lengthwise. If the tree is jarred, the worm has a peculiar habit of dropping toward the ground on a silken thread of its own making. Figure 156. In early summer, the larvae burrow within the earth and pupate there. Later they emerge as adults. Figure 157, D and E. You observe the peculiar difference between the wingless female, D, and the winged male, E. It is the habit of this wingless female to crawl up the trunk of some nearby tree in order to deposit her eggs upon the twigs. These eggs, shown at A and B, hatch into the greedy larvae that do so much damage to our orchards. Nearly all the common birds feed freely upon the cankerworm and benefit the orchard in so doing. The chickadee is perhaps the most useful. A recent writer is very positive that each chickadee will devour on an average 30 female cankerworm moths a day, and that if the average number of eggs laid by each female is 185, one chickadee will thus destroy in one day 5,550 eggs, and in the 25 days in which the cankerworm moths crawl up the tree, would rid the orchard of 138,750. These birds also eat immense numbers of cankerworm eggs before they hatch into worms. Treatment. The inability of the female to fly gives us an easy way to prevent the larval offspring from getting to the foliage of our trees, for we know that the only highway open to her or her larvae leads up the trunk. We must obstruct this highway so that no crawling insect may pass. This is readily done by smoothing the bark and fitting close to it a band of paper, and making sure that it is tight enough to prevent anything from crawling underneath. Then smear over the paper something so sticky that any moth or larva that attempts to pass will be entangled. Printer's ink will do very well, or you can buy either dendroline or tanglefoot. Encourage the chickadee and all other birds, except the English sparrow, to stay in your orchard. This is easily done by feeding and protecting them in their times of need. The apple tree tent caterpillar. The apple tree tent caterpillar is a larva so well known that you will only need to be told how to guard against it. The mother of this caterpillar is a reddish moth. This insect passes the winter in the egg state, securely fastened to the twigs as shown in Figure 159a. Treatment. There are three principal methods. 1. Destroy the eggs. The egg masses are readily seen in winter and may easily be collected and burned by boys. The chickadee eats great quantities of these eggs. 2. With torches, burn the nests at dusk when all the worms are within. You must be very careful in burning, or you will harm the young branches with their tender bark. 3. Encourage the residence of birds. Urge your neighbors to make war on the larvae too, since the pest spreads rapidly from farm to farm. Regularly sprayed orchards are rarely troubled by this pest. The twig girdler. The twig girdler lays her eggs in the twigs of pear, pecan, apple, and other trees. It is necessary that the larvae develop in dead wood. This the mother provides by girdling the twig so deeply that it will die and fall to the ground. Treatment. Since the larvae spend the winter in the dead twigs, burn these twigs in autumn or early spring and thus destroy the pest. The peach tree borer. In Figure 161, you will see the effect of the peach tree borer's activity. These borers often girdle and thereby kill a tree. Figure 162 shows the adult state of the insect. The eggs are laid on peach or plum trees near the ground. As soon as the larva emerges, it bores into the bark and remains there for months, passing through the pupa stage before it comes out to lay eggs for another generation. Treatment. If there are only a few trees in the orchard, digging the worms out with a knife is the best way of destroying them. You can know of the borer's presence by the exuding gum often seen on the tree trunk. If you pile earth around the roots early in the spring and remove it in the late fall, the winter freezing and thawing will kill many of the larvae. Exercise. How many apples per 100 do you find injured by the codling moth? Collect some cocoons from a pear or an apple tree in winter, place in a breeding cage, and watch for the moths to come out. Do you ever see the woodpecker hunting for these same cocoons? Can you find cocoons that have been emptied by this bird? Estimate how many he considers a day's ration. How many apples does he thus save? Watch the curculio lay her eggs in the plums, peaches, and cherries. What % of fruit is thus injured? Estimate the damage. Let the school offer a prize for the greatest number of tent caterpillar eggs. Watch such trees as the apple, the wild and the cultivated cherry, the oak, and many others. Make a collection of insects injurious to orchard fruits, showing in each case the whole life history of the insect, that is, eggs, larvae, pupa, and the mature insects. Section 33. Garden and Field Insects. The cabbage worm. The cabbage worm of the early spring garden is a familiar object, but you may not know that the innocent-looking little white butterflies hovering above the cabbage patch are laying eggs, which are soon to hatch and make the dreaded cabbage worms. Figure 164 A and B show the common cabbage butterfly, C shows several examples of the caterpillar, and D shows the pupa case. In the pupa stage, the insects pass the winter among the remains of old plants, or in nearby fences, or in weeds or bushes. Cleaning up and burning all trash will destroy many pupa and thus prevent many cabbage worms. In Figure 164, E and F show the moth and zebra caterpillar. G represents a moth which is the parent of the small green worm shown at H. This worm is a common foe of the cabbage plant. Treatment. Birds aid in the destruction of this pest. Paris green, mixed with air-slaked lime, will also kill many larvae. After the cabbage has headed, it is very difficult to destroy the worm, but pyrethrum insect powder used freely is helpful. The chinch bug. The chinch bug, attacking as it does such important crops as wheat, corn, and grasses, is a well-known pest. It probably causes more money loss than any other garden or field enemy. In Orange County, North Carolina, farmers were once obliged to suspend wheat growing for 2 years on account of the chinch bug. In 1 year in the state of Illinois, this bug caused a loss of $4 million. Treatment. Unfortunately, we cannot prevent all the damage done by chinch bugs, but we can diminish it somewhat by good, clean agriculture. Destroy the winter homes of the insect by burning dry grass, leaves, and rubbish in fields and fence rows. Although the insect has wings, it seldom or never uses them, usually traveling on foot. Therefore, a deep furrow around the field to be protected will hinder or stop the progress of an invasion. The bugs fall into the bottom of the furrow and may there be killed by dragging a log up and down the furrow. Write to the Division of Entomology, Washington, for bulletins on the chinch bug. Other methods of prevention are to be found in these bulletins. The plant louse. The plant louse is very small, but it multiplies with very great rapidity. During the summer, the young are born alive, and it is only toward fall that eggs are laid. The individuals that hatch from eggs are generally wingless females, and their young, born alive, are both winged and wingless. The winged forms fly to other plants and start new colonies. Plant lice mature in about 8 to 14 days. The plant louse gives off a sweetish fluid of which some ants are very fond. You may often see the ants stroking these lice to induce them to give off a freer flow of the honey dew. This is really a method of milking. However friendly and helpful these cows may be to the ant, they are enemies to man in destroying so many of his plants. Treatment. These are sucking insects. Poisons therefore do not avail. They may be killed by spraying with kerosene emulsion or a strong soap solution or with tobacco water. Lice on cabbages are easily killed by a mixture of 1 pound of lye soap in 4 gallons of warm water. The squash bug. The squash bug does its greatest damage to young plants. To such its attack is often fatal. On larger plants, single leaves may die. This insect is a serious enemy to a crop and is particularly difficult to get rid of, since it belongs to the class of sucking insects, not to the biting insects. For this reason, poisons are useless. Treatment. About the only practicable remedy is to pick these insects by hand. We can, however, protect our young plants by small nettings and thus tide them over the most dangerous period of their lives. These bugs generally prefer the squash as food. You can therefore diminish their attack on your melons, cucumbers, etc., by planting among the melons an occasional squash plant as a trap plant. Hand picking will be easier on a few trap plants than over the whole field. A small board or large leaf laid beside the young plant often furnishes night shelter for the bugs. The bugs collected under the board may easily be killed every morning. The flea beetle. The flea beetle inflicts much damage on the potato, tomato, eggplant, and other garden plants. The accompanying figure shows the common striped flea beetle, which lives on the tomato. The larva of this beetle lives inside of the leaves, mining its way through the leaf in a real tunnel. Any substance disagreeable to the beetle, such as plaster, soot, ashes, or tobacco, will repel its attacks on the garden crops. The weevil. The weevil is commonly found among seeds. Its attacks are serious, but the insect may easily be destroyed. Treatment. Put the infected seeds in an airtight box or bin, placing on the top of the pile a dish containing carbon disulfide, a tablespoon to a bushel of seeds. The fumes of this substance are heavy and will pass through the mass of seeds below and kill all the weevils and other animals there. The bin should be closely covered with canvas or heavy cloth to prevent the fumes from being carried away by the air. Let the seeds remain thus for 2 to 5 days. Repeat the treatment if any weevils are found alive. Fumigate when the temperature is 70 degrees Fahrenheit or above. In cold weather or in a loose bin, the treatment is not successful. Caution: do not approach the bin with a light, since the fumes of the chemical used are highly flammable. The Hessian fly. The Hessian fly does more damage to the wheat crop than all other insects combined, and probably ranks next to the chinch bug as the second worst insect enemy of the farmer. It was probably introduced into this country by the Hessian troops in the War of the Revolution. In autumn, the insect lays its eggs in the leaves of the wheat. These hatch into larvae, which move down into the crown of the plant, where they pass the winter. There they cause on the plant a slight gall formation, which injures or kills the plant. In the spring, adult flies emerge and lay eggs. The larvae that hatch feed in the lower joints of the growing wheat and prevent its proper growth. These larvae pupate and remain as pupae in the wheat stubble during the summer. The fall brood of flies appears shortly before the first heavy frost. Treatment. Burn all stubble and trash during July and August. If the fly is very bad, it is well to leave the stubble unusually high to ensure a rapid spread of the fire. Burn refuse from the threshing machine, since this often harbors many larvae or pupae. Follow the burning by deep plowing, because the burning cannot reach the insects that are in the base of the plants. Delay the fall planting until time for heavy frosts. The potato beetle, tobacco worm. The potato beetle, tobacco worm, etc., are too well known to need description. Suffice it to say that no good farmer will neglect to protect his crop from any pest that threatens it. The increase, owing to various causes, of insects, of fungi, of bacterial diseases, makes a study of these pests, of their origin, and of their prevention a necessary part of a successful farmer's training. Tillage alone will no longer render orchard, vineyard, and garden fruitful. Protection from every form of plant enemies must be added to tillage. In dealing with plants, as with human beings, the great object should not be the cure but the prevention of the disease. If the disease can be prevented, it is far too costly to wait for it to develop and then to attempt its cure. Men of science are studying the new forms of diseases and new insects as fast as they appear. These men are finding ways of fighting old and new enemies. Young people who expect to farm should early learn to follow their advice. Exercise. How does the squash bug resemble the plant louse? Is this a true bug? Gather some eggs and watch the development of the insects in a breeding cage. Estimate the damage done to some crops by the flea beetle. What is the best method of prevention? Do you know the large moth that is the mother of the tobacco worm? You may often see her visiting the blossoms of the jimson weed. Some tobacco growers cultivate a few of these weeds in a tobacco field. In the blossom, they place a little cobalt or fly stone and syrup. When the tobacco worm moth visits this flower and sips the poison nectar, she will, of course, lay no more troublesome eggs. Section 34. The cotton boll weevil. So far as known, the cotton boll weevil, an insect which is a native of the tropics, crossed the Rio Grande River into Texas in 1891 and 1892. It settled in the cotton fields around Brownsville. Since then it has widened its destructive area until now it has invaded the whole territory shown by the map on page 177. This weevil is a small gray or reddish-brown snout beetle, hardly over a quarter of an inch in length. In proportion to its length, it has a long beak. It belongs to a family of beetles which breed in pods, in seeds, and in stalks of plants. It is a greedy eater, but feeds only on the cotton plant. The grown weevils try to outlive the cold of winter by hiding snugly away under grass clumps, cotton stalks, rubbish, or under the bark of trees. Sometimes they go down into holes in the ground. A comfortable shelter is often found in the forests near the cotton fields, especially in the moss of the trees. The weevils can stand a good deal of cold, but fortunately many are killed by winter weather. Moreover, birds destroy many. Hence by spring the last year's crop is very greatly diminished. In the spring, generally about the time cotton begins to form squares, the weevils shake off their long winter sleep and enter the cotton fields with appetites as sharp as razors. Then shortly the females begin to lay eggs. At first these eggs are laid only in the squares, and generally only one to the square. The young grub hatches from these eggs in 2 or 3 days. The newly hatched grub eats the inside of the square, and the square soon falls to the ground. Entire fields may at times be seen without a single square on the plants. Of course, no fruit can be formed without squares. In from 1 to 2 weeks, the grub or larva becomes fully grown, and without changing its home is transformed into the pupa state. Then in about a week more, the pupae come out as adult weevils and attack the bolls. They puncture them with their snouts and lay their eggs in the bolls. The young grubs, this time hatching out in the boll, remain there until grown, when they emerge through holes that they make. These holes allow dampness to enter and destroy the bolls. This life round continues until cold weather drives the insects to their winter quarters. By that time they have increased so rapidly that there is often one for every boll in the field. This weevil is proving very hard to destroy. At present there seem but few ways to fight it. One is to grow cotton that will mature too early for the weevils to do much harm. The second is to kill as many weevils as possible by burning the homes that shelter them in winter. The places best adapted for a winter home for the weevil are trash piles, rubbish, driftwood, rotten wood, weeds, moss on trees, etc. A further help, therefore, in destroying the weevil is to cut down and burn all cotton stalks as soon as the cotton is harvested. This destroys countless numbers of larvae and pupae in the bolls and greatly reduces the number of weevils. In addition, all corn stalks, all trash, all large clumps of grass in neighboring fields should be burned, so as to destroy these winter homes of the weevil. Also avoid planting cotton near trees. The bark, moss, and fallen leaves of the tree furnish a winter shelter for the weevils. A third help in destroying the weevil is to rotate crops. If cotton does not follow cotton, the weevil has nothing on which to feed the second year. In adopting the first method mentioned, the cotton growers have found that by the careful selection of seed, by early planting, by a free use of fertilizers containing phosphoric acid, and by frequent plowing, they can mature a crop about 30 days earlier than they usually do. In this way a good crop can be harvested before the weevils are ready to be most destructive. End of chapter 7.